The coffee machine sputtered its last drops into Rebecca Harper's mug, just as her phone buzzed with the email she'd been dreading all week. All staff meeting in conference room B, 15 minutes, the message read, and her stomach dropped because everyone knew what that meant. Budget cuts. Restructuring. Corporate speak for someone's getting axed or shipped off somewhere they didn't want to go. Rebecca grabbed her coffee and headed toward the conference room, weaving through the maze of desks at Morrison Publishing House. She'd worked here for 3 years as a senior editor, carefully building her reputation one manuscript at a time. At 26, she was finally getting the respect she deserved, working on books that actually mattered instead of celebrity ghost-written drivel. The conference room was already half full when she arrived. She slid into a seat near the back, next to Margaret from accounting, who was nervously tapping her pen against her notepad. Across the room, she spotted Yates Sullivan leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, looking as unbothered as always. Yates was the kind of guy who never seemed stressed about anything. He joined the company about 8 months ago as a junior acquisitions editor, which had struck Rebecca as odd at the time. The man had to be at least 30, maybe 32, and junior positions usually went to fresh college graduates. He'd explained it away as a career change, said he'd been in consulting before and wanted to do something more meaningful. Rebecca had to admit he was good at his job. Really good. He had an eye for talent that bordered on supernatural, pulling in 3 debut authors in his first 6 months who'd all gotten serious buzz. But there was something about him that didn't quite add up. The expensive watch he wore sometimes. The way he talked about international markets like he'd personally negotiated deals there. The casual confidence that came from somewhere deeper than just being good at your job. "All right, everyone, let's get started," Gloria Morrison announced, striding into the room with her assistant trailing behind her. Gloria was the current CEO, granddaughter of the founder, and she looked exhausted. "I'm going to cut right to it. The London office is in trouble." A collective murmur rippled through the room. "Our UK division has lost 3 major authors in the past 2 months, and if we don't turn things around, we're looking at closing that office entirely. That means 30 jobs gone, and it means Morrison Publishing loses its international presence." Rebecca felt her chest tighten. She'd always dreamed of working on international projects. "I need 2 people to go to London for 3 weeks. You'll be working directly with the team there to assess what's going wrong, rebuild author relationships, and put together a strategy to save the office." Gloria's eyes swept the room. "Rebecca Harper and Yates Sullivan, my office after this meeting." Rebecca's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. 3 weeks in London with Yates Sullivan. 3 weeks to save an entire office. 3 weeks that would either make her career or destroy it. The meeting continued with more details about quarterly numbers and upcoming releases, but Rebecca couldn't focus on any of it. Her mind was already racing ahead to London, to what this meant, to the sheer impossibility of fixing a problem this big in such a short time. When Gloria finally dismissed them, Rebecca made her way to the CEO's office with Yates falling into step beside her. "Big opportunity," he said, his voice low and calm. "Or a suicide mission," Rebecca replied. "Why us?" "You're the best editor we have for literary fiction, and that's where they're hemorrhaging authors. I've got the acquisition and negotiation background." He held the door open for her. "Makes sense on paper." "Nothing about this makes sense," Rebecca muttered, but she walked through the door anyway. Gloria's office was all dark wood and leather chairs, the kind of old money elegance that reminded you this company had been around for almost a century. Gloria gestured for them to sit. "I know this is sudden," she began, settling behind her desk. "But you 2 are the only ones I trust with this. Rebecca, you have relationships with authors that go beyond business. They trust you. Yates, you understand the market in a way most people take decades to learn. Together, you might actually pull this off. What exactly happened in London? Yates asked, leaning forward slightly. Gloria sighed. Mismanagement, mostly. The director there has been making promises he can't keep, playing favorites, letting communication fall apart. 3 of our biggest authors jumped ship to Penguin Random House last month. The staff is demoralized. The authors who are left feel neglected, and frankly, I can't be in 2 places at once. Why not just replace the director? Rebecca asked. I plan to, but not until I know exactly what needs to happen next. That's where you come in. You'll have full authority to make decisions within reason. I need detailed reports, a strategic plan, and most importantly, I need you to convince at least 2 of those authors to come back. Rebecca felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. When do we leave? Friday. That gives you 3 days to wrap up your current projects and pack. My assistant will handle flights and accommodation. You'll be staying at a corporate apartment in Kensington, separate bedrooms obviously, but it's more cost-effective than hotels for 3 weeks. Yates glanced at Rebecca. Works for me if it works for you. Sure, Rebecca said, though sharing an apartment with a coworker she barely knew for 3 weeks sounded like its own special kind of awkward. I'm in. Good. Gloria stood, signaling the meeting was over. I'm trusting you both with the future of this company's international division. Don't let me down. Walking back to their desks, Rebecca felt Yates watching her. You okay with this? He asked. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice. He stopped at his desk, which was neat in a way that Rebecca's never was. But for what it's worth, I think we can actually do this. Your optimism is noted, Rebecca said dryly. I need to start making lists. So many lists. The next 3 days blurred together in a chaos of handoffs and preparations. Rebecca briefed her assistant editor on all her current projects, made phone calls to authors to let them know she'd be out of the country, and packed and repacked her suitcase 4 times because she had no idea what the weather would be like or how formal she needed to dress. Her best friend Simone came over Thursday night with wine and moral support. So you're going to London with the hot, mysterious guy, Simone said, flopping onto Rebecca's bed and watching her fold yet another blazer. This is like the start of a romance novel. This is work, Rebecca corrected, though she couldn't help smiling. Very stressful, career-defining work. He is hot though, right? I've seen him when I've met you for lunch. Tall, dark hair, that whole strong, silent type thing going on. Rebecca rolled her eyes. I haven't really thought about it. Liar. Okay, yes, he's objectively attractive. But that's irrelevant because we're colleagues and we're going to be focused on saving 30 people's jobs, not on whatever romantic comedy scenario you're imagining. Simone took a sip of wine, looking unconvinced. 3 weeks in London sharing an apartment. I'm just saying things happen. Things are not going to happen. But Friday morning, standing in the airport terminal waiting to board their flight, Rebecca felt an odd flutter of nervousness that had nothing to do with work. Yates appeared looking unfairly put together for someone about to spend 7 hours on a plane. He wore dark jeans and a gray Henley that somehow made him look both casual and expensive, and he carried a leather weekender bag that was definitely not from any store Rebecca could afford. Ready? He asked, handing her one of the 2 coffee cups he was carrying. You didn't have to do that, she said, taking it gratefully. Long flight ahead. Figured we could both use the caffeine. He checked his watch. We're boarding in 10. The flight itself was surprisingly pleasant. Gloria had apparently sprung for premium economy, which meant actual legroom and seats that reclined more than 2 inches. Yates took the window seat and immediately pulled out a book. Rebecca noticed it was a manuscript, one she recognized from their submissions pile. "You took reading homework on the plane?" she asked. "Best time to read, no interruptions." He glanced over at her. "You didn't bring anything?" "I brought 3 manuscripts, my laptop, and 2 books on publishing industry trends," Rebecca admitted. "I might have a problem." "That's not a problem. That's called being good at your job." They fell into a comfortable silence, both reading. Rebecca found herself sneaking glances at him every so often, wondering about the pieces that didn't quite fit. The way he'd known exactly which terminal to go to without checking. The fact that he'd somehow gotten them through security in record time. Small things that individually meant nothing but together painted a picture of someone more experienced with travel than a junior editor should be. When the flight attendant came around with lunch, Yates ordered in what sounded like perfect French. Rebecca's eyebrows rose. "Consulting," he said simply, answering her unasked question. "Spent a lot of time in Europe." "Right," Rebecca said slowly. "What kind of consulting?" "The boring corporate kind. Strategy, mergers, and acquisitions. Nothing interesting." There was something in the way he said it that made Rebecca think there was much more to that story, but she let it drop. They weren't friends. They were coworkers on a business trip. His past was his business. They landed at Heathrow in the early evening, London time. Rebecca's body insisted it was still afternoon, but the gray drizzle outside the airplane window said otherwise. The apartment Gloria had arranged was indeed in Kensington, a gorgeous 2-bedroom flat in an old building with crown molding and big windows overlooking a tree-lined street. "This is nice," Rebecca said, wheeling her suitcase into the larger of the 2 bedrooms. "Really nice." "Gloria doesn't cut corners when it matters," Yates called from the other room. They spent the evening getting settled, ordering Indian takeout that arrived surprisingly fast, and going over their game plan for Monday. The London office was in Bloomsbury, not far from the British Museum. They had meetings scheduled with the remaining staff, a few authors who were still under contract but unhappy, and they needed to somehow track down the 3 who'd left to see if there was any chance of winning them back. "It's a lot," Rebecca said, staring at her notes spread across the coffee table. "I don't even know where to start." "We start with the staff," Yates said. He changed into joggers and a t-shirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "They know what's really going on. Authors leave for reasons, and usually those reasons start with feeling undervalued or misunderstood. The staff will tell us why." "You sound very sure about that." "I've seen it before." He met her eyes. "In my previous work, companies fall apart from the inside first. The external stuff is just symptoms." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Okay, so we go in Monday, we listen, we figure out what's broken, and then we fix it." He said it with such simple confidence that Rebecca almost believed it was possible. That night, lying in a bed in London, jet-lagged and anxious, Rebecca stared at the ceiling and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. 3 weeks seemed impossibly long and terrifyingly short all at once. The weekend passed in a blur of adjustment and exploration. They walked through Hyde Park on Saturday morning, both fighting jet lag, grabbing coffee at a tiny shop that Yates somehow knew about despite claiming he'd only been to London a few times. Sunday they prepared for Monday, reviewing files and rehearsing their approach. Monday morning arrived gray and cool. Rebecca dressed carefully in a navy blazer and professional slacks, armor for whatever battle was about to begin. Yates wore a crisp white shirt and dark pants, and Rebecca noticed he'd foregone his usual expensive watch for something simpler. Professional but not flashy. The London office was smaller than she'd expected, just 2 floors of a converted townhouse. The staff assembled in the main conference room looked tired and wary. There were maybe 15 people total, a mix of editors, marketing staff, and administrative assistants. "Hi, everyone," Rebecca began, deciding to be direct. "I'm Rebecca Harper, senior editor from the New York office. This is Yates Sullivan, acquisitions. We're here for the next 3 weeks to figure out how to make this office thrive again. We're not here to fire anyone or point fingers. We're here to listen and to help." A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair spoke up. "And if you decide we're beyond help, then we'll know we tried everything," Yates said. His voice was calm, authoritative. "But I don't think that's where we'll end up. Gloria Morrison doesn't give up on things easily, and neither do we." They spent the whole day in meetings, individual conversations with each staff member, group discussions about workflow and communication, deep dives into what had gone wrong with the 3 departed authors. A picture started to emerge, and it wasn't pretty. The director, a man named Charles Whitmore, had been making decisions without consulting his team. He'd promised authors marketing budgets that didn't exist, then blamed the staff when they couldn't deliver. He'd played favorites, giving all the attention to 1 or 2 big names while letting everyone else's work languish. And when authors complained, he dismissed their concerns instead of addressing them. "He's been with the company for 20 years, one of the editors, a young guy named Oliver, explained. "I think he stopped caring somewhere along the way. It became about his ego instead of the books." By the end of the day, Rebecca felt exhausted and angry. This was fixable. All of it had been preventable. "Charles is done," she told Yates as they rode the tube back to Kensington. "He has to go." "Agreed. But we need a replacement ready before we make that move. Can't leave them directorless." "Promote from within," Rebecca said immediately. "That woman, Patricia. She's been there 12 years, everyone respects her, and she actually gives a damn." Yates nodded. "I was thinking the same thing. We'll float it past her tomorrow, see if she's interested." They grabbed dinner at a pub near the apartment, both too tired to cook. Over fish and chips, they started talking about more than just work. Rebecca found herself telling Yates about why she'd gotten into publishing, about her love of stories and her belief that books could change lives. "I know it sounds naive," she said, wiping vinegar from her fingers. "But I really believe it. The right book at the right time can save someone." "It's not naive," Yates said quietly. "It's why this matters. It's why we're here." "Why did you switch from consulting?" Rebecca asked, emboldened by exhaustion and the second beer she was nursing. "Really?" Yates was quiet for a long moment, turning his glass in his hands. "I was successful, made a lot of money, but I woke up one day and realized I didn't care about any of it. Mergers and acquisitions, helping rich companies get richer. It felt empty." He looked up at her. "I wanted to do something that mattered. Books seemed like a good place to start." There was something in his eyes, something deeper than he was saying, but Rebecca didn't push. She understood wanting to start over, to build something meaningful. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Mornings at the office, interviewing staff and reviewing author files. Afternoons reaching out to authors, both the unhappy ones who remained and the 3 who'd left. Evenings back at the apartment, comparing notes and building their strategy. Rebecca found herself looking forward to those evenings more than she wanted to admit. Yates was easy to talk to once you got past his reserved exterior. He was funny in a dry, subtle way. He listened when she talked, really listened, asking questions that showed he was thinking about what she'd said. And he was brilliant at his job, seeing patterns and solutions that Rebecca missed. By the end of the first week, they'd made real progress. Patricia had agreed to take over as director if offered the position. They'd identified the key problems in workflow and communication, and they'd managed to get coffee meetings scheduled with 2 of the 3 departed authors. "This is actually working," Rebecca said Friday evening, collapsing onto the couch with a glass of wine. "I can't believe it, but it's working." Yates sat down beside her, closer than he usually did. She caught a hint of his cologne, something cedar and clean. "You're good at this. The authors trust you." "We're good at this," Rebecca corrected. "I couldn't do it without you." Their eyes met and held for a moment too long. Rebecca felt her breath catch. The air between them suddenly felt charged with something she didn't want to name. Yates cleared his throat and looked away. "We should celebrate. Actual celebration, not just wine on the couch. There's supposed to be a good Italian place around the corner." Dinner felt like a date even though it wasn't. They sat at a small table tucked in the back, candles flickering between them, and talked about everything except work. Rebecca learned that Yates had grown up in Connecticut, that he'd studied economics and literature in college, that he loved hiking and terrible action movies and cooking elaborate meals he had no one to share with. "No girlfriend?" Rebecca asked, then immediately wished she hadn't. Too personal. Too obvious. "Not for a while," Yates said. "My last relationship ended about a year ago. She wanted someone who was around, more present. I was traveling constantly for work. She wasn't wrong to leave. I'm sorry. Don't be. It wasn't right, and we both knew it. Just took a while to admit it." He leaned back, studying her. "What about you?" "Single for about 6 months. He was a professor, very intellectual, very sure he was smarter than everyone, including me. Started explaining my own job to me at parties. That was the final straw." Yates laughed, a real laugh that transformed his whole face. "I'm trying to imagine someone thinking they know editing better than you. Right, the audacity." Rebecca grinned. "I don't miss him even a little bit." Walking back to the apartment through the quiet London streets, their shoulders brushed occasionally. Neither of them moved away. Rebecca knew she was in dangerous territory. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were coworkers. This was a business trip. But every day she spent with Yates, she found herself liking him more, wanting to know him better, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he almost smiled, the careful way he listened, the competence and kindness that radiated from him. The second week brought bigger challenges. They met with Julia Chen, one of the departed authors, at a cafe in Notting Hill. Julia was a rising star in literary fiction, her debut novel having won 3 major awards. Losing her had been a huge blow. "I loved Morrison," Julia said, stirring sugar into her tea. "I really did. But Charles made promises about the marketing campaign for my second book that never materialized. I felt like he didn't respect my work or my concerns. When Penguin approached me, I jumped." "What would it take for you to come back?" Rebecca asked gently. Julia looked between them. "Honesty, for one. A team that actually communicates, and a guarantee that my work will get the attention it deserves, not just lip service." "Charles is being removed," Yates said. "We're restructuring the leadership. Patricia Morris will be the new director." Julia's eyebrows rose. "Patricia." "I like Patricia. She's good at her job and she cares," Rebecca added. "What if we could guarantee you a dedicated editor who you'd work with directly, regular check-ins, full transparency on marketing and sales, no surprises?" They talked for another hour. Julia didn't commit, but she promised to think about it. It was more than they'd hoped for. The second meeting went less well. Marcus Stone, a thriller writer with a massive following, met them at his lawyer's office and made it clear he had no interest in returning. "Morrison had its chance," he said flatly. "I'm happy where I am." Yates didn't argue. He simply thanked Marcus for his time and left his card just in case. Walking out of that office, Rebecca felt deflated. "1 out of 2 isn't bad," Yates said, hailing a taxi. "And we still have one more to track down." That evening, Rebecca made pasta in the apartment kitchen while Yates opened wine and told her stories about his hiking trips in the White Mountains. It was domestic in a way that made Rebecca's chest ache. This wasn't real life. This was a bubble, a temporary situation. In a week and a half they'd be back in New York, back to their separate desks and separate lives. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, noticing she'd gone quiet. "Just that this is going to end," Rebecca admitted. "The trip, all of this." Yates set down his wine glass. "Would that be so bad, going back?" "No, yes, I don't know." Rebecca turned off the stove, facing him. "I like this. Working with you like this, I'm not ready for it to be over." The words hung in the air between them. Yates stood, crossing the small kitchen to stand in front of her. He was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Rebecca," he said quietly, and there was something in the way he said her name that made her heart race. "I need to tell you something." Her phone rang, shattering the moment. She jumped, fumbling for it in her pocket. Gloria Morrison's name flashed on the screen. "I have to take this," she whispered. Yates stepped back, nodding. "Gloria, hi," Rebecca said, walking into the living room. "How are things in New York?" "Never mind New York, how are things there? Give me good news." Rebecca filled her in on their progress, the staff restructuring plan, Patricia's promotion, the author meetings. Gloria sounded pleased but stressed. "I need you both to stay an extra week if you can," Gloria said. 4 weeks total. "I know it's more than we discussed, but I want to make sure this sticks. Can you do that?" Rebecca's eyes found Yates, who was watching her from the kitchen doorway. "Another week. 7 more days in this strange, perfect bubble." "Let me check with Yates," she said. She lowered the phone. "Gloria wants us to stay an extra week. Are you okay with that?" Something flickered across his face. Concern, maybe, or conflict, but he nodded. "Yeah, I can make that work." Rebecca confirmed with Gloria and hung up. When she turned around, Yates was pouring the pasta into bowls. "What were you going to tell me?" she asked. Before the phone rang, "It can wait," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Let's eat before this gets cold." But the moment had passed, and whatever Yates had been about to say remained unspoken. They ate dinner, making small talk about the weather and their plans for the weekend. The easy intimacy from earlier felt strained now, and Rebecca didn't know why. The third week brought a breakthrough. They met with the third departed author, Sarah Blackwell, at her home in Cambridge. Sarah wrote sweeping historical fiction that consistently hit bestseller lists. Getting her back would be a major coup. Sarah was warmer than they'd expected, inviting them in for tea and homemade scones. As they talked, it became clear that her issues weren't with Morrison Publishing itself but with Charles specifically. "He never read my books," Sarah said simply. "I could tell. He'd make comments that showed he had no idea what my work was about. It was insulting." "I've read all 3 of your novels," Rebecca said. "The way you weave historical detail with emotional truth is remarkable. Your Catherine the Great book made me cry on the subway." Sarah's face softened. "You read it twice. I studied it honestly. You're one of the best historical fiction writers working today." They spent 2 hours talking about Sarah's work, her process, her vision for her next novel. By the end, Sarah agreed to consider returning if Patricia was truly in charge and if she could work directly with someone who understood her work. "Someone like you," Sarah said, looking at Rebecca. Walking back to the train station, Yates bumped his shoulder against hers. "You were amazing in there. I just told the truth. Her work is brilliant. You made her feel seen. That's everything." Rebecca smiled up at him. "We make a good team." "Yeah," Yates said softly, "we really do." That night they stayed up late working on their final presentation for Gloria. The plan was comprehensive. New leadership, restructured communication protocols, dedicated author liaisons, transparent marketing processes. Patricia would take over as director with a significant budget increase to deliver on promises made to authors. 2 of the 3 departed authors were seriously considering return. Rebecca felt proud of what they'd accomplished. More than that, she felt changed. Working with Yates had shown her what real partnership could look like. They challenged each other, supported each other, brought out the best in each other's work. And somewhere along the way, she'd fallen for him. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely impractical. They were sitting on the floor of the living room, papers spread around them, laptops open. It was past midnight. Yates had loosened his collar and rolled up his sleeves, and Rebecca was running on her 3rd coffee of the evening. "I think we're done," Yates announced, saving the final document. "This is good, really good." "We should celebrate," Rebecca said. "Actually celebrate this time, not just say we should and then keep working." "What did you have in mind?" Rebecca felt bold and reckless. "There's a jazz club in Soho I read about. Live music, good drinks. Want to go tomorrow night?" Yates studied her for a long moment. "Like a date?" Her heart hammered. Would that be terrible if it was? "Rebecca." He closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. "I need to tell you something first, something I should have told you a while ago." The seriousness in his tone made her nervous. "Okay, I'm not who you think I am." "I mean I am, but not entirely." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. "My name is Yates Sullivan. That part's true, and I do work for Morrison Publishing, but I'm not a junior acquisitions editor." Rebecca's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "My full name is Yates Morrison Sullivan. My mother was Gloria's cousin. Morrison Publishing is my family's company, too." He took a breath. "I'm the CEO of Sullivan Media Group. We own 43 companies across 12 countries, including 3 major publishing houses in Europe. I'm worth about $800 million, give or take." Rebecca felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "What?" "I joined Morrison Publishing under a false title because I wanted to understand the industry from the ground up before proposing a merger. Gloria knows who I am. She's been in on it from the start. The plan was for me to learn the business, prove I understood it, and then we'd combine resources. Make Morrison truly international." "You lied." Rebecca stood up, papers scattering. "You've been lying this whole time." "I didn't lie exactly. I do work there." "I did want to learn." "You absolutely lied. A lie of omission is still a lie, Yates. Or should I call you Mr. Sullivan?" She felt betrayed, furious. "What was this? Some kind of undercover boss situation? Did you think it was funny watching all of us treat you like a regular employee?" "It wasn't like that." Yates stood too, reaching for her. "Rebecca, please, don't." She stepped back. "Is that why Gloria sent us here? Was this whole thing about evaluating me, seeing if I was good enough for whatever merger plan you're cooking up?" "No, the London office really is in trouble. You really were the best person for this job. That part was all real. But you weren't real. This partnership, everything we've built here, it was all based on a lie." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes and hated herself for it. "I trusted you. I know, and I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I didn't know how. The longer it went on, the harder it got. Why tell me now? Because you asked me if going to that jazz club would be a date. Because I can't let this go any further without you knowing the truth." His voice was raw. "Because I'm falling in love with you, and I can't build something real on a foundation of lies." Rebecca's breath caught. "You're what? Falling in love with you? Maybe already there. I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe when you argued with me about that debut author in our first week. Maybe when you made pasta and told me about why books matter. Maybe every moment in between." He took a tentative step closer. "I know I messed this up. I know I should have told you sooner, but everything I've felt, everything between us, that's been real. That's been the most real thing in my life." Rebecca wanted to stay angry. She had every right to be angry. But looking at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear that she'd walk away, she found her fury wavering. $800 million, she said faintly, "give or take. And you're a CEO. Several times over, technically. This is insane, I know." Rebecca sat down on the couch, her legs suddenly unsteady. Yates sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "Why Morrison Publishing?" she asked. "If you're worth that much, why go through all this?" "Because my companies make money, but they don't make meaning. Gloria's been trying to expand internationally for years, but doesn't have the capital. I have the capital, but not the expertise. Together, we could build something incredible. But I needed to understand the business first, really understand it. Not just the numbers, but the heart of it, the people. So you became a junior editor. So I became a junior editor. I wanted to see how books actually get made from submission to publication. I wanted to understand what editors do, what makes a good acquisition, how you build relationships with authors. And I learned all that." He turned to face her. "But I also learned what it's like to work with someone who's brilliant and passionate, and who cares about the work as much as I'm learning to. I learned what it feels like to want to impress someone because they matter, not because they're a business contact. I learned what I've been missing my entire life. Which is, you, Rebecca, I've been missing you." She wanted to be immune to his words, but she wasn't. "You still lied." "I did. And if you can't forgive that, I'll understand, but I'm asking you to try. I'm asking for a chance to prove that who I am with you is real, regardless of the title or the money or any of it." Rebecca thought about the past 3 weeks. The long days and easy evenings. The way they worked together like two parts of a whole. The laughter and the connection and the feeling that she'd found something rare and precious. "You're falling in love with me," she said quietly. "Yes. That's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I'm falling for you too. Have been for days, maybe weeks." She finally looked at him. "But I don't know if I can trust you now. Then let me earn it back. Let me show you who I really am." Yates reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. "Full transparency from here on out. Ask me anything. I'll tell you everything." "Everything? Everything?" So she asked. She asked about his childhood, about growing up wealthy, about the pressure of family expectations. She asked about his business, how he'd built it, what he actually did all day in his real job. She asked why he'd never married, why he'd chosen this path, what he wanted from life. Yates answered it all honestly. He told her about feeling lost despite his success, about watching his parents' loveless marriage end in a bitter divorce, about building companies as a way to prove himself, but never feeling like it was enough. He told her about seeing Gloria at a family reunion 2 years ago and hearing about Morrison's struggles and having an idea that maybe this could be the thing that mattered. "I've been so focused on the end game that I forgot to live," he said. "Until you make me want to actually be present. To build a life, not just a portfolio." Dawn was breaking outside the windows by the time they finished talking. Rebecca felt wrung out and strangely hopeful. "I need time," she said, "to process this, to figure out what it means. Take all the time you need. But I don't want you to sleep on the couch tonight." She saw his surprise. "I want you to hold me, just hold me. Can you do that?" "Yeah," Yates said softly. "I can do that." They went to Rebecca's room and lay down on top of the covers, still fully dressed. Yates wrapped his arms around her, and she tucked her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was steady and real, and despite everything, she felt safe. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered. "Thank you for listening." They fell asleep like that, tangled together as London woke up outside. The 4th week began with a strange new dynamic. At the office, they continued their work as planned, But now Rebecca saw everything through a different lens. The way staff deferred to Yates made more sense now. The quiet authority he carried was because he'd been giving orders to CEOs and boards for years. His insights into international markets were because he owned companies in those markets. But there were also small moments where the real Yates shone through. His patience with nervous junior staff. The way he lit up when talking about a book he loved. The careful respect he showed everyone, regardless of their position. Money hadn't made him cruel or dismissive. If anything, he seemed to work twice as hard to prove he deserved to be taken seriously for his ideas, not his bank account. Patricia officially accepted the director position on Tuesday. Gloria flew in on Wednesday to make it formal and to hear their complete report. The three of them met in Patricia's new office while the rest of the staff worked outside, unaware that major changes were about to be announced. "This is excellent work," Gloria said, reviewing their presentation. "Both of you exceeded my expectations. Patricia, I'm confident you're going to turn this office around." "I'll do my best," Patricia said. "Having a real budget helps." Gloria turned to Yates and Rebecca. "I'm implementing all of your recommendations. Patricia will get the resources she needs. We'll restructure author support exactly as you've outlined. And pending contract negotiations, it looks like we'll be getting at least 2 of our departed authors back." "Sarah Blackwell confirmed this morning," Rebecca said. "She's in if Patricia is running things and if she can work with an editor who understands historical fiction." "Which would be you," Gloria said. "How do you feel about becoming her dedicated editor?" "It would mean regular trips to London even after this assignment ends." Rebecca's heart jumped. "Seriously, you've proven you can handle it, and Sarah specifically requested you." Gloria smiled. "Plus, someone needs to be the point person for London operations going forward. Yates can't do it." Rebecca glanced at Yates, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Because he's not actually a junior editor," Rebecca said. Gloria had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "He told you. He told me." "Are you angry with me for keeping his secret?" Rebecca considered. "I understand why you did it. Doesn't mean I like it. Fair enough. For what it's worth, I've never seen Yates work as hard as he has these past 3 weeks. You bring out something good in him." Gloria stood. "I need to go make some calls. You two take the rest of the day. You've earned it." After Gloria left, Patricia hugged them both. "Thank you. Truly, you saved this office." "You're going to save it," Yates corrected. "We just cleared some obstacles out of your way." Walking out of the building for the last time, Rebecca felt bittersweet. They'd accomplished what they came for. Tomorrow they'd fly back to New York and everything would change again. "Want to get lunch?" Yates asked. "There's a place by the Thames I've been wanting to try." "The real you has been to London a lot, hasn't he?" "About 20 times. I have a flat in Mayfair I use when I'm here on business." It was still surreal, reconciling the man she'd gotten to know with this other version. But Rebecca was trying. Lunch was at her restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. They sat outside despite the cool breeze, watching boats drift by. "What happens now?" Rebecca asked. "When we get back to New York. That depends on you." "How so?" Yates set down his fork. "I need to tell Gloria that I'm ready to move forward with the merger. Sullivan Media will acquire Morrison Publishing, but Gloria stays on as publisher with full creative control. I'll handle the business side, expansion, international distribution, capital investment. It's what we've been building toward. And your cover as junior editor is blown. Extremely blown." He smiled slightly. "I'll be working out of the main office, but in a different capacity. Corporate strategy, acquisitions in the business sense rather than the book sense. So we won't be colleagues anymore." "No, we won't." Rebecca absorbed this. "Would we have been? If you'd stayed undercover, probably not for long. The plan was always for me to reveal myself eventually. This just happened sooner than intended. Because of me, because of you, he confirmed, because I couldn't keep lying to you. What do you want, Yates? From me, from this? He reached across the table, taking her hand. I want to date you properly. Take you to dinner, see a show, go for walks in Central Park. I want to introduce you to my life and be part of yours. I want to figure out if this feeling between us is as real and as right as I think it is. And if people think I'm dating you for your money, then they don't know you at all. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you knows you care about books and stories and making a difference. That's not someone who can be bought. You're very confident. I'm confident about you, about us. He pulled her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. But I'm also patient. If you need more time, I'll wait. Rebecca thought about what Simone had said back in New York, about romance novels and things happening. Maybe her best friend had been right. Maybe some stories were worth believing in. I don't need more time, she said. I need you to kiss me properly. Right now. Yates stood, pulling her up with him. His hands cupped her face, and when his lips met hers, Rebecca felt the world narrow to just this moment. The kiss was soft and searching at first, then deeper, filled with 3 weeks of tension and longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Rebecca was smiling. That was worth waiting for, she said. We're just getting started. They spent the afternoon walking along the Thames, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. Yates pointed out buildings and told her stories about London. Rebecca talked about her dreams for her career, her hopes for Morrison's future. They stopped at a bookshop in Covent Garden and spent an hour browsing, each picking out books for the other. That evening, their last night in London, Yates took her to the jazz club she'd mentioned. They sat close in a dim corner, listening to a woman with a voice like smoke sing about love and loss. Yates's arm was around Rebecca's shoulders, her head resting against him, and everything felt exactly right. I'm going to miss this place, Rebecca said during a break between sets. We'll come back, as often as you want. Sarah's going to need her dedicated editor, remember. Is this real? Rebecca asked. Are we really doing this? I think we are. It's fast. Sometimes fast is right. Yates turned her face toward his. I spent 32 years building a life that looked impressive but felt empty. 3 weeks with you showed me what I've been missing. I'm not interested in slow anymore, not with you. Rebecca kissed him, not caring who saw. Then let's not be slow. They left the jazz club and walked back to the apartment through the London night. In the elevator, Yates kissed her against the wall, and Rebecca felt heat pool in her stomach. They'd been so careful, so restrained. But that restraint was crumbling. Inside the apartment, Yates pulled back. Tell me what you want. You, Rebecca said simply. All of you, no more holding back. What happened next was inevitable and perfect. They made their way to Yates's room, learning each other with hands and lips and whispered words. He was gentle and thorough, paying attention to every response, every gasp. Rebecca had never felt so seen, so desired. When they finally came together, it felt like coming home. Afterward, wrapped in sheets and each other, Rebecca traced patterns on Yates's chest. So you're a CEO, she said. That's going to take some getting used to. I'm also the guy who burns toast and can't parallel park and is absolutely terrified of birds. Rebecca laughed. Birds, pigeons specifically, don't ask. Oh, I'm definitely asking. He told her a ridiculous story about being chased by pigeons in Rome when he was 12, and Rebecca laughed until her sides hurt. This was the Yates she'd fallen for. Successful and powerful, yes, but also human and flawed and wonderfully real. They flew back to New York the next day, and reality hit hard. There were meetings with Gloria and the Morrison board, announcements about the merger, press releases about Yates's identity. Rebecca found herself at the center of office gossip, everyone wanting to know if she'd known if they were together, what the story was. She handled it with as much grace as she could, confirming nothing but denying nothing either. Let them speculate. She knew the truth. The merger went through within 6 weeks. Sullivan Media officially acquired Morrison Publishing, but true to Yates's word, Gloria retained full control of editorial and creative decisions. The company got an influx of capital that meant better advances for authors, bigger marketing budgets, and expanded international distribution. Yates moved into a corner office on the executive floor, and Rebecca became director of international literary fiction, overseeing author relationships in both New York and London. She flew to London once a month to work with Sarah and other authors, and Yates usually found reasons to have business there at the same time. Dating him was surreal. One night they'd be eating pizza on her couch watching bad movies. The next they'd be at a charity gala where people worth billions casually discuss their portfolios. Yates navigated both worlds with equal ease, but Rebecca could tell which one he preferred. He was happiest in her tiny apartment, cooking dinner together, arguing about books. 3 months after London, Yates asked her to move in with him. His penthouse overlooking Central Park was obscenely beautiful, all glass and modern art and city views. Rebecca said yes, but insisted on keeping some of her thrift store furniture. It has character, she argued, gesturing to her worn leather chair. It has questionable stains, Yates countered, but he let her keep it anyway. They fell into a rhythm. Work was work, separate and professional, but home was theirs, a sanctuary they built together. Yates taught Rebecca to cook properly, and she introduced him to the joy of reading in bed on Sunday mornings. They traveled when they could, mixing business with pleasure, exploring cities together. 6 months in, Rebecca met Yates's mother, a formidable woman who grilled her about her intentions and career goals. By the end of the dinner, Margaret Sullivan was showing Rebecca embarrassing photos of Yates as a child and asking when they planned to make her a grandmother. "Mom," Yates said, mortified, "I'm just saying I'm not getting any younger." Rebecca liked her immediately. A year after London, Yates proposed. They were back in the city where they'd fallen in love, staying at his flat in Mayfair. He took her to the Thames path where they'd walked that last afternoon, and as the sun set over the river, he got down on one knee. "I fell in love with you while pretending to be someone else," he said, "but you saw through all of that to who I really was. You made me want to be better, do better, live better. You're my partner in every way that matters. Will you marry me?" The ring was vintage, an emerald surrounded by diamonds that had belonged to his grandmother. Rebecca cried as she said yes, and Yates slipped it onto her finger with shaking hands. They were married 8 months later in a ceremony that blended both their worlds. Close family and friends at an estate in Connecticut. Nothing too flashy, despite Yates's ability to make it extravagant. Gloria officiated, which felt right given she'd brought them together in the first place. Rebecca wore a simple silk gown and carried roses. Yates cried when he saw her walk down the aisle. During their vows, they promised to always be honest with each other, to choose partnership over pride, to build a life filled with books and love and meaning. Simone was Rebecca's maid of honor, and during her toast, she reminded everyone that she'd called it from the beginning. "I knew something would happen in London," she declared. "Romance novel plot," I told her. Morrison Publishing thrived under the merger. They opened 2 new international offices, tripled their debut author program, and won multiple industry awards. Rebecca's division became known for launching literary careers, and authors specifically requested to work with her. But what Rebecca was proudest of was the London office. Under Patricia's leadership, it became the strongest division in the company. Sarah's books continued to hit bestseller lists, and Julia Chen came back and published a second novel that won the Booker Prize. 2 years into their marriage, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. Yates was simultaneously thrilled and terrified. "What if I'm terrible at this?" he asked, his hand splayed across her still flat stomach. "You won't be. You're going to be an amazing father." "How do you know?" "Because you care. Because you show up. Because you learn to change careers and identities just to understand something better. You'll figure out fatherhood the same way." Their daughter arrived on a snowy January morning, tiny and perfect. They named her Eleanor after Rebecca's grandmother. Yates held her with such tender awe that Rebecca fell in love with him all over again. Parenthood was exhausting and wonderful. They hired help but were both fiercely hands-on. Yates adjusted his schedule to be home for bedtime. Rebecca brought Eleanor to the office sometimes, letting her babble through conference calls with understanding authors. They figured it out together, the way they figured out everything. 3 years after Eleanor, they had a son, James. Their penthouse became chaos, filled with toys and laughter and love. Yates proved to be the kind of father who built elaborate blanket forts and read stories with different voices for every character. Rebecca watched him play with their children and marveled at how far they'd both come. Morrison Publishing continued to grow. The London office expanded again, and Rebecca spent weeks there several times a year, often bringing the kids. They'd walk through the same streets she and Yates had walked as co-workers, now as a family, and Rebecca never stopped feeling grateful. On their 5th anniversary, Yates surprised her with a trip back to London, just the two of them. They stayed at the same apartment in Kensington, now owned by the company but rarely used. "Remember being here?" Yates asked, pulling her into his arms in the living room where they'd first kissed. "Every detail. I was so confused about my feelings for you. I was falling apart trying not to tell you the truth. Best business trip ever, though. Best anything ever." He kissed her softly. "You changed my entire life, Rebecca. We changed each other's lives." They made love in the same bed where they'd first been together, older now and more practiced but no less passionate. Afterward, wrapped around each other, Yates whispered thank you into her hair. "For what?" "For seeing me, the real me, for taking a chance on us." He tilted her face up to his. "For making my life mean something. Yates Sullivan, your life meant something long before me. It means more with you in it." Rebecca kissed him, pouring 5 years of love and partnership and gratitude into it. They'd built something real and lasting, despite the unusual beginning. They'd chosen honesty and trust in each other. Every day, years passed in the beautiful chaos of family life and career success. Eleanor grew into a voracious reader who declared she wanted to be an editor like Mommy. James was more interested in numbers, often sitting with Yates to learn about business. They were happy, all 4 of them, in a way Rebecca had never imagined possible. On their 10th anniversary, the company threw a celebration. Morrison Publishing had become one of the most respected publishers in the world, known for discovering new voices and treating authors with integrity. Gloria, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, gave a speech. 10 years ago, I sent 2 people to London on what seemed like an impossible mission. I knew they were talented, but I didn't know they'd become the heart of this company. Rebecca and Yates didn't just save our London office. They showed all of us what partnership looks like. What happens when you combine passion with purpose, creativity with strategy, and love with hard work. She raised her glass. To Rebecca and Yates, who prove every day that the best stories aren't just the ones we publish. Sometimes we get to live them." The room erupted in applause. Rebecca found Yates's hand under the table, squeezing tight. They'd come so far from that first morning in a conference room, learning they'd be working together in London. She'd been annoyed at the disruption to her life. He'd been hiding who he really was. Neither of them had expected to find everything they'd been looking for. That night, after the party, they sat on their terrace overlooking Central Park. The city glittered below them, endless and alive. Their children were asleep inside, watched over by a trusted sitter. It was just the two of them, the way it had been in London all those years ago. "Do you ever regret it?" Rebecca asked. "Giving up your anonymity? The merger changed everything for you. Not for a second. I'd do it all again exactly the same way." Yates pulled her closer. "Though maybe I'd tell you the truth sooner. The timing was perfect. Any earlier and I might not have fallen for the real you first. You think you fell for a fake version of me? No. I fell for the person you wanted to be, the one who cared about books and meaning instead of just money. You gave yourself permission to be that person by stepping away from your old life. The real Yates was the one I met in London." He was quiet for a moment. "I never thought of it that way. The CEO thing, the money, the empire, that's what you do. But who you are is the man who reads manuscripts on airplanes and makes terrible puns and loves our kids fiercely and shows up for the people who matter. That's the person I love. I love you too, more than I have words for." Yates kissed her temple. "Thank you for that terrible business trip that changed my life." Rebecca laughed. "It wasn't terrible once I got used to you." High praise. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city they loved. Tomorrow they'd be back to the beautiful chaos of family and work. Alina had a school project due. James had a soccer game. Rebecca had manuscripts to read and Yates had board meetings to attend. Life would continue in its messy, wonderful way. But tonight, on their anniversary, they let themselves just be. Two people who'd found each other against the odds, who'd built something real and lasting, who chose each other every single day. The story that began with a forced business trip and a CEO in disguise had become a love story for the ages. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Not because it was easy, but because they'd worked for it. Not because fate had intervened, but because they'd both been brave enough to take a chance. Rebecca looked at the ring on her finger, the emerald catching the light. She thought about the girl she'd been, annoyed about a business trip, uncertain about her future. She'd had no idea that getting on that plane would lead her here. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked. "Just that I'd do it all again, too. Every moment. Even the frustrating parts where you were being mysterious and I wanted to strangle you." "I wasn't that mysterious. You were absolutely that mysterious." They laughed together, the sound carrying out over the city. Inside, their children slept peacefully. Below, New York pulsed with a million stories waiting to be told. And here, on this terrace, Rebecca and Yates wrote the next chapter of their own. It was a story about second chances and honest truths, about finding partnership in unexpected places, about building a life that mattered, filled with work you believed in and people you loved, about a business trip that became something so much more. It was their story, and it was perfect precisely because it was theirs. Years later, when Alina was old enough to understand, she asked how her parents met. Rebecca and Yates shared a look, that wordless communication that came from years of partnership. "Well," Rebecca began, "it started with a business trip I didn't want to take. And a secret I shouldn't have kept," Yates added. "And somehow," Rebecca finished, reaching for his hand, "it became the best thing that ever happened to both of us." Alina wrinkled her nose. "That's so boring. Don't you have something more exciting?" Rebecca and Yates laughed. Maybe someday their daughter would understand that the best love stories weren't about drama or grand gestures. They were about two people choosing each other, day after day, year after year, building a life of meaning and purpose and joy. But for now, they had their secret. They had London and the Thames and the apartment in Kensington where it all began. They had late nights working together and early mornings with their children. They had Morrison Publishing and the books that brought them together. They had each other, and that was more than enough. That was everything. The end.